First things first, rest in peace, Heather Lewis. From what I've been able to read about, she had a tough life, hence why I feel bad about my rating. Am I a mean person if I hate a book by a person who is dead and suffered from serious abuse? Because Notice by Heather Lewis is not a good book, and contrary to semi-popular belief, isn't even a disturbing book, let alone the most disturbing book ever. But shout out to Criminally all day, he's one of my favourite booktubers. He has a great video talking about how this is the most disturbing book he's ever read. Before I get into my review of the same book, please like and subscribe and tell us what your most disturbing books are in the comments. For the scores, Notice gets the following. Plot, 10. Nothing happens, really, in this book. Characters, 10. All the characters were bad. Not just people, but just badly written. Emotional impacts, 25. This score should be a thought of as a standard empathy for what happens. That's how you should think of it. But I wouldn't say that this is an emotional, provoking book. Pacing, 50 is a good standard pace that's kept up throughout. Writing style, 15. Themes, 40. Uniqueness, 40. Book cover, 60. It is a fitting book cover given the subject. Overall score, 24.5. This book is classified in many ways: horror, autofiction, confessional work, memoir. It's a weird one to pin down, and that's because it's a fictional work about an aspect of the author's life. In this book, we follow a woman named Nina who gets into prostitution, as it appears, pretty casually. She gets a reputation for a craft in a specific spot. She's usually in control until she comes across one guy who she's been with before. This guy takes her to his home and does sadistic acts to her. His wife, Ingrid, participates at times and simply watches during other times. It all depends on what the husband wants. It's unclear, as it is usually the case, whether Ingrid, as the wife, is a willing participant or not. Regardless, the two have their own side relationship, it seems, that goes beyond the transactional nature of prostitution. It seems to be a relationship that is weird and not healthy for either of them. Regardless, their vines of suffering intertwine. Nina's arrested for prostitution and taken away to this kind of unit where she strikes up a relationship with one of the staff members. Beth is her name, and she, I guess, abuses Nina simply due to the power dynamics, but it's presented like a standard relationship, and that's how it is in Nina's thoughts. They establish a weird professional, personal, erotic routine that seems to be in a weird space and causes Nina a lot of inner turmoil. But Nina hasn't shaken off Ingrid, and therefore she's in this kind of weird love triangle, a very twisted one. On top of that, she has customers, two of which play a role in the series that lead to unfortunate events at the end of the book. What's crazy is that Nina knows her behaviour is destructive. Between all the sex, drugs, abuse, psychological torture, she never catches a break. There's this quote: "This is what my life looked like to me, just resting up for more of the same kind of thing that took me nowhere good." What did I like about the book? Credit where credit is due. Lewis demands nuance in this book, and grace. A shit ton of grace, I think. The complexity of power dynamics, especially between women, is something we rarely like to explore and acknowledge in society. We seem to be able to protest the usual male and female dynamics, but we struggle when women have power and abuse it. Notice did get me thinking a lot about the complexity of Nina and Ingrid's bond, as well as Beth's. These kind of relationships tend to escalate very quickly, and this is what happens in the book. They build up small acts of kindness that seem in defiance to the overt sexual deviance of the husband. But is it really? The strange thing about this book is that it's the women that seem to have the greatest effect on Nina. There's a lot more range with them in that they make Nina feel more, but the feelings are complex. They may even victimize her more, which is pretty fascinating. Nina loves and hates them at the same time, and this makes it tricky to establish the full boundary regarding abuse, because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. It is multiple levels of fuckery with the women in this book, quite frankly. What didn't I like about this book? There is a touching introduction in this book, and Melissa noted that this book was rejected, by 18 editors while Lewis was alive, and I'm not at all surprised. As a book, it isn't a good one, and because she was alive when she tried to get it published, it makes sense that it was rejected so many times. As regular viewers of my channel will know, I don't mince words in my reviews or replies to comments, quite frankly. I do try to be respectful and appreciate different opinions, of course, especially to Brandon Sanderson fans who I have engaged with a lot on this channel. So with this book, Lewis's prose are very blunt, very sharp. Some could say deadpan. This isn't a surprise given the events of this book. However, for me as a reader, the decision to just use this as the standard writing style, as opposed to using it in certain situations, detracts from the book. Because when exploring a character's feelings about things like abuse, sex, drugs, etc., that kind of delivery falls flat. I think this is the case even with the general consensus from readers of this book, that it's showing abuse in a bare bones kind of way. It just didn't do it for me, if I'm being honest. And I have to say, my opinion on Heather Lewis's life is meaningless, okay? But I do feel for her and people who suffer abuse. I'm being critical from a pure literary point of view, which I should have said at the beginning. I guess the themes of sex, prostitution, and freedom come up in this book. Because when Nina was in her weird situation with the couple, she could have just left. And she does for a bit anyway. But when she was staying with the couple, there wasn't locked doors or anything like that. In fact, she got fresh air daily, doing errands with Ingrid while her husband was at work. Things like this annoy me in literature, but I'm being harsh here because I know this happens in real life too. I remember a news story way back a few years ago about a mass shooting in America. The police couldn't get into the building because they thought the door was closed, so they had to wait for the key. Turns out no one actually tried to just open the door. No one tried the handle. It was unlocked the whole time that the mass shooting was taking place. We are weird creatures after all, so the part of the book where Nina is in the couple with the home is extremely realistic. It's just jarring to read about, especially when it comes to escaping, because you want her to escape. The biggest thing is expectation, and I believe this is where this book falls flat also, and where a lot of books fall flat for readers in general. I was preparing myself for a really disturbing read. This is a book with disturbing content, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't call it a disturbing read, you know. It sounds strange, but that's where I'm at with it. All the choices and literary devices used to make this book haunting just don't do it for me. I already went into the book with sympathy and empathy for the life of Heather Lewis. For what it's worth, may she rest in peace. On your screen is a playlist of her book reviews. Your next favourite book is waiting there, I promise. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening.